I'm Rob Shields, and this is Peace Talks, the podcast that covers everything to do with competitive jigsaw puzzling. Louise Jackett knew she had found her tribe at her very first competition. Since then, Lou has dedicated herself to giving others that same sense of community, eventually becoming president of the Australian Jigsaw Puzzle Association and co-founding the Speed Puzzling World Series. In this episode, we follow her puzzling arc and dig into what the World Series is all about. Lou Jackett, thanks for joining Peace Talks.
Great to be with you, Rob.
Let's jump in and begin at the beginning. What's your earliest puzzle memory?
Puzzle memories are a huge component of when I think back to my childhood.
Really?
Absolutely. I was just definitely doing a jigsaw puzzle was where I found a lot of solace as a child. And I loved in particular Charles Wysocki puzzles. So artist that you're obviously very familiar with, maybe less people in Australia.
Famous for Americana, yeah.
Yes. And I just loved that art. I just got really absorbed into just the seasonality of the images. There's so much detail, the beautiful architecture, so many horses and wagons, and it was just such a beautiful style of art. So I could always remember being completely absorbed in those when I was a child. And in fact, the art I loved so much that inspired when I was around 30 a trip to the US. And I remember wanting to find that blazing fall foliage. and and so I remember going to the Catskills and the Berkshires and really basically recreating a holiday across the US based on my love of Charles Wysocki. So yeah.
That's amazing. So at what point, if at all, do you recall running into jigsaw puzzling as a competitive thing?
Yeah, it was definitely COVID for me. My partner at the time noticed that when we were doing jigsaw puzzles in all those lockdowns that I was pretty fast. I could be doing it upside down with a glass of wine in hand, and for every piece he was putting in, I was putting in about 5. And
Wow.
I certainly wasn't, I'm not a top puzzler. I think of myself as front of the middle pack now. But back then, I was pretty keen on figuring out whether or not this was something that I was any good at. And so at around that time, I jumped on Google, Facebook, and found the Australian Jigsaw Puzzle Association Facebook group and started realizing that there were people doing it for speed. And in fact, there was a video, which I still remember, which is really kind of what drew me in to speed puzzling. It was 2 people doing the Ravensburger floral reflections, racing during lockdown. And those 2 individuals were Annika Thompson, who is the now UK JPA president, and Jason Stevens, who many of your listeners will know very well. He does an amazing job with the live stream, and he's our tech guru in the Australian Jigsaw Puzzle Association. So those 2, I was fangirling them. I saw them at our first competition when I went in 2021, and I got hooked. So after my first competition, I started volunteering amongst the AJPA state and national competitions, and haven't looked back. It's been wonderful.
So how did you even hear about the first competition? So it sounds like you ran across a video that showed people doing a competition, but how did you find one yourself? Were you inspired to go hunt one down and there happened to be one in your area, or how did you get it?
Yeah, so the AJPA Facebook group was then developing as a sort of central source of information and had been started by the founder and president of the AJPA, Deanne Healy. And Deanne has since stepped down to start Interschool Puzzle Club, which is she's doing now full time, absolutely going great guns here in Australia. But the way that she was really growing the puzzle community in Australia was through this Facebook group and in parallel with starting up some state and national competitions. And so it was just a natural progression that I found the first state competition. And in fact, that was in Queensland. So I'm based here in Victoria. So I was lucky enough to be traveling interstate for work when I found that Queensland competition. And that's how I found it. So it was kind of by chance.
Did you do any practice? Did you just sign up and you were like, let's go try it out?
Yeah, I did practice. And look, my first competition was between 2020 and 21. So I do remember practicing as a way to really give myself something to do during those
Mm.
lockdowns. So by the time I turned up to the competition, I had done a little bit of practice, nowhere near probably what, the levels of practice that we've seen today. But it was definitely something that I felt really passionate. I felt like it had given me a purpose and something to really focus on during lockdowns. And that was definitely a theme that I really have leaned into, particularly as I've moved into the more organizational side of things, really understanding what a speed puzzle competition means for people, because it's
Mm.
very easy for me to think back to that time and remember that it gave me such a strong sense of purpose and focus at that time, and certainly a lot of mindfulness, well-being benefits from having that. Looking forward to that first competition.
So is it fair to say that it was sort of a holistic capturing of your brain? Like I imagine that if you were interested in the speed part at all, there's a competitive component of it. There's a practice and focus component. There's the relaxation, there's the mindfulness. Like once you put your toe in that water, it may be hard to pull it back out if you have the right kind of personality. So is that the way it worked for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Holistic is the right way. And then on top of that, I've always just been absorbed in the visual side of puzzling and sort of enjoying, even the emotional connection with art. That's just something that I've also always really loved. I do have a very visual specialty for my career. So I'm always looking down at detailed things. So I think I just have always really, yeah, I found that I can get absorbed into a jigsaw puzzle, and then I'm also pretty competitive internally with myself. That's always been my nature, and I'm also a real doer, so I like having some goal or something to focus on. So speed puzzling just really hit all of those aspects for me, and I love that even though I'm not one of the top puzzlers. I think I represent someone in that middle of the pack who gets so much from speed puzzling and knows that a lot of the improvements, a lot of the personal growth comes from internal goals, just getting better, discovering something new, trying out different techniques. And it's, yeah, coming along for the journey and understanding what the amazing elite puzzlers are doing as this sport evolves and just enjoying it, yeah, as an individual and from that sort of personal growth side is very rewarding.
How was your first actual competition then? So you went, you were sort of prepared for it. Did it go like you had expected?
Yeah, I did. I think I got in the top 10. It was a very small competition. It was a very hard puzzle, really challenging puzzle, and it took a really long time. I know you can probably see my time there. It was really long. And I do actually remember that competition was one that Annika and Jason won, and they nailed it in the pairs competition. I think it went as I expected. I remember being so nervous, but the feeling of that I'd found my tribe when I was sitting there waiting for 1, 2, 3, go
It was
was
that clear right then.
it was yeah, absolutely. It was immediate for me. And I didn't really talk to many people on that initial competition, but the next one I went to, I I was volunteering and completely hooked from that point.
Yeah, this it's funny because I have a timeline that I put together of like what I
Mm,
can tell of sort of your history of things. And the first thing is this Queensland competition. The very next thing is volunteering. So
yes.
like was that the immediate pivot? You were like, I'm enjoying this competing, but I also need to be more of a part of it at the same time.
Absolutely. And I suppose looking at that timeline, so I think that first Queensland competition was in April of 2021. So that was still in the sort of middle of COVID, and we had that there was a little period where we'd come out and we were able to travel interstate, but then Australia still went back, as with much of the world, back into a sort of a heavy lockdown. And in fact, where I lived, it was a longer lockdown after that. So I had to wait a full year before I was even allowed to travel out of state. And so the next competition I went to was basically a full year later, again to Queensland. And by that stage, so many competitions had been cancelled and been left disappointed. And so I realized there was just this, a year later, I felt so passionate about the competition and that really positive experience in the first place that it was a no-brainer for me to start volunteering. And at that second Queensland competition where I did volunteer, became really fast friends with Diane, Annika, Jason. We just really gelled. There were a few other individuals as well. And they really have been at the core of AJPA and still are today. Annika was living in Australia at the time, of course, and she's since moved to the UK. But again, that's the nature of Annika as well. She's a go-getter. Like whenever she puts her mind to something, she does it incredibly well. So it's just a group of like-minded individuals that I came across, and it's very hard to say no when you find a group who do amazing things like that.
Now, do you normally throw yourself in with such passion to hobbies or other parts of your life, or was this unusual?
No, this is pretty typical. But I'm selective though about what I will put my heart and soul into.
I feel like you have to be if you're going to go that far.
Yes. So actually, I was doing my PhD at the time when I discovered speed puzzling and also working full time. So the last few years of my life had been quite busy, and there's a lot to balance when I was managing all that. So I think puzzling for me was an outlet where maybe previously long distance running had been. So that had been something, with the loss of competitions from COVID, my long distance running was something I'd previously been focusing on a lot. And I just needed something that was a little bit more, I suppose, internal. And jigsaw puzzling was something that really just, resonated in that sense. And I think for me, being able to volunteer with the community, there's such we were bouncing ideas off each other. And it was such an infectious group of people, so many amazing skills who are, that are possessed by so many people in the Australian jigsaw puzzling community. And that's just not on our committee, but I'm also seeing across the community more widely. There's just this infectious and insatiable appetite for speed puzzling in Australia. And so it's really lovely to have been part of it as it's just grown very organically. Because until Diane started the AJPA, there wasn't a strong history or a strong culture of speed puzzling, unlike it may have been previously established in Europe and across North America. So it was something that was very brand new and really cool to be something as part of something as it's been growing.
The very next thing I have on my list is that you went to World.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's accurate. So you did an event in 2021. It sounds like you did another event sometime 2022, and then off to Worlds from there. So
so there were actually two competitions between that and Worlds. So I think it was we did about 3 competitions in a row within the space of about 3 or 4 weeks. So that was a Queensland competition, one in my home state here in Victoria, and then another one in South Australia. And so I had travelled around with Diane, Jason, and Annika to those competitions. And what you might sort of not be aware of in Australia is the way that Diane set up the AJPA was that it's a one centralised group who is establishing these competitions in every state. So that's unlike my understanding of how it works in the USA, where it's a more centralized national event that's planned and then more peripherally organized and sanctioned events. So Diane was really pioneering something completely new where she was bringing her passion and expertise and traveling around the states. And so we were all able to come together. And I suppose that's when I just decided I really wanted to support what she was doing. So in the space of a month, that's how we did about 3 different competitions. And as a result of, really becoming fast friends, we thought, what about a crazy idea? why don't we go to Worlds? Diane had talked so much about it because she'd been in 2019 and she was desperate
Right.
to go back for another one. And her enthusiasm for it was so wonderful that that's why we all decided to go.
And I have to ask again, did you guys do any preparation or practice in advance of going off to Worlds?
I think we did a few teams puzzles while we must have been volunteering at one of these state events because we were
Mm-hmm.
all traveling and together for the weekend. But it was a fairly impulsive, crazy decision to go. It wasn't, and it was more drawn out of the passion for the community and learning about the events as well. That was something that Diane was really focused on as well. The support that she could derive from the international community in learning how to run events. So it was as much about the participation as it was about growing this community and being part of the community. And so I think for me, it was a natural progression that going to Worlds, I remember volunteering at my first Worlds as well. And it was, it was really grassroots then. And, still has been. The championships has always been reliant on the goodwill of so many
Mm-hmm.
volunteers and the community. But yeah, and so I've been back for 4 years now. So I've had a little bit of experience when it comes to the champs.
Did you find that the first Worlds was an accelerant to your desire to not just participate from a competitive point of view, but all of the things that you were already doing? Like, you volunteered at Worlds, you're part of this kind of community creation. And I'm just wondering if that first Worlds feels like it could have continued to accelerate that sort of feeling of national organization and community building.
I think that's a really good way to encompass it. Accelerate the community that we were building is definitely what was happening. And I think it is really unique. So we're such an interesting country. We've got such a large landmass, a relatively small population. We've got a sort of an accessible number of states. We've got 6 states and 2 territories. Australians are very used to traveling. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we have a really sort of strong sense of community that's spread out across this large landmass. And so I think we have a low threshold for traveling longer distances. So that's probably why you found so many Australians willing to go. But I think they were willing to go, if they're lucky enough to be able to travel, a really strong pull of the community. And in fact, I've loved watching over the years the little jersey that we did, which was our kind of green and gold jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I remember creating that t-shirt. It was on that very kind of impulsive decision for the four of us originally to go. And Deanne was talking about it. It's like, oh, it's like the Olympics of speed puzzling. And I was like, well, if it's the Olympics, then we need to look like Olympians. And I was like, let's just do a green and gold shirt. And I worked with a designer and I did a mood board, and I pulled some shirts that looked like professional darts, and I just loved all their kind of really cool, kind of crazy graphics. And then I pulled out some sort of Australian like soccer or football jerseys and some rugby jerseys, and just did this mood board and sent it off to a designer with a terrible kind of like PowerPoint presentation. And he came back with a really cool design, which was pretty much the design that you still see today. And so that was just our team t-shirt. And then it was really lovely to see that the following year, people were like wanting other Aussies who were traveling really wanted to get in, the spirit. And so then it just sort of became the sort of official jersey of all the Australians. And it's quite a logistical task to get everybody from all across Australia to get their sizes, and we have them, sort of individualized with names. But it's something that most as Aussies who've travelled to Worlds have decided to do, and so I think it does contribute to a lot of the camaraderie.
What an awesome ripple into the future this one act that you did had, right? Like,
Yeah, it was
in a
cool.
very real sense, you're like, well, it'd be really cool to have jerseys. Let's have jerseys. And then it became sort of iconic in a way that maybe I suspect you didn't, like, you maybe could have hoped for, but probably didn't have any idea was going to happen. You were just like, these are the shirts we're going to wear.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I mean, I've always had an appreciation for the importance of, visual imagery and the way that it influences human behavior. So, having a uniform is something that, is such an enduring thing that sporting teams and, schools and a whole range of groups and communities lean into. We certainly don't have an equivalent amongst AJPA here in Australia. People don't come to competitions with the same jersey, but we do have, a T-shirt that is more of a local one that we have. And I don't know. I think just leaning into that kind of visual imagery. Again, I don't know whether it's all linked into the same way. I love the visuals of jigsaw puzzling, but it was. I'm really glad that it was a lovely thing, and it's a lovely ripple effect to have had.
Your guys' nationals are fairly late in the year, November, December timeframe,
Mm,
which means that you went to your first worlds before you went to your first nationals, probably.
yes.
First of all, I'm not sure at this point how involved you are, but you're volunteering. You're part of now this core seeding organization.
hmm
Were there things that you guys brought back from Worlds that you informed Australian nationals?
Yeah, it's hard for me to remember exactly what was going on at the time, but I certainly wasn't, at the forefront of organizing the events at that stage. That's something that came a little bit later. But it was definitely a really rich, kind of fertile ground for learning about what's important in terms of integrity of competition, fairness of competition. I think I was really blown away at the skill and started being really interested in all the variables that come to when it comes to puzzling and different styles of images. And that is something that has developed so organically as discussions and about puzzling and skills and techniques amongst the absolute elite. But certainly from the perspective of someone who would be ultimately interested in organizing these platforms, that's probably where I started thinking about those concepts.
So then in 2023, correct me if I'm wrong, you started to be able to apply some of the organizational principles into a new competition,
Mhm,
the competition for a cause.
mhm.
Tell me a little bit about how that got started, because first of all, it's interesting in and of itself, but also it starts to speak to, correct me if I'm wrong, being more active in the competition organizing side of things as well as just the administration side of things.
For that timeline, certainly up until then, I'd mostly been a volunteer doing, yeah, the grants writing and things for AJPA. And I was really inspired, along with Jason Stevens, who we talked about before, and another great friend of mine in the organization, Ellie Higgins. She looks after a lot of the social media for AJPA and is a really great puzzler in her own right.
And Pear's partner of yours, if I recall.
Yeah, my amazing pairs partner. Yes. She's just had a baby, so I'm not sure how much pairing we'll do in the future, but I'm certainly a better pairs puzzler for her. She's amazing. And so at this time, there was a huge momentum in Victoria, in Melbourne, where I live, and we really only had the state competition once per year. And we really felt that there was an opportunity to do another large scale event that was, I suppose, we're still affiliated with AJPA, but just adding to the capacity of competitions in our local area. And we'd both just had loved ones pass away very unexpectedly. And we really wanted to do a competition that had a fundraiser element for a charity with mental health. So we chose Australia's national youth mental health charity, Headspace. And so we really used that as maybe part of our own healing from the grief that we were going through. We were like, look, let's just organize a local puzzle competition. We know that it gives so much to us as individuals when we participate, and we just really wanted to expand that to a broader community. And I think also we were getting the sense that there were a lot of people interested in speed puzzling who might have been put off by the idea of a state competition or a state championship. And so maybe creating something that was a little bit more accessible. And that is certainly what ended up happening. The feedback that we got from the competition for a cause, with its shift to being more of a community event, a fundraiser element, and certainly a lot of people resonated with the charity that we supported. So it ended up being a really successful event that we threw together very quickly and managed to do a second one only about 5 months later. It
Wow.
was kind of crazy what I learnt in the first one. It was probably a bit ambitious to go from a timeline of having the idea of 2 months and then executing. I was very lucky to actually get access to the puzzles that I wanted. I think that was pure luck. I have since had to be a lot more resourceful and more planning when it comes to organizing competitions.
In 2024, the Australian Nationals seem to have gone through an explosion in terms of the number of people there. It'd been like 2 years in a row of 100 something people, which is nothing to sneeze at, absolutely. And then suddenly in 2024, there was double that number of people showing up. Any idea what was driving all of that?
The fact that the AJPA, this is driven by Diane at this stage, was running so many state competitions. So most states and territories in Australia had a competition that was centrally organised by AJPA. And it had such a cohesion in the way that it was being organised. But also in parallel, we have such a strong Facebook group. Like I think we have about 23,000 on the Facebook group, and it's actually closed to Australian citizens only. I think we might have a few New Zealanders, but it's a really active local Facebook community that I think supports a lot of the conversations and enthusiasm. So it's a real asset to AJPA that allows you to kind of build the competitions. They sell out really, really quickly. But I think that's probably the building of the community was done so well that it's just really accelerated the growth and reflected in the ticketing numbers.
Were you particularly involved in the competition, the Australian Nationals in 2024? Because I know that you said in 2022, not really. You were kind of in different parts of the organization. Is that still true in 2024?
Yeah. So in August 2024, Diane asked me if I would step into the vice president role. And the plan was really to shadow her for about a year, and then with the view of stepping into the president role if that was what the organization democratically chose in 2026. So around about now. Um, but at the same time, Diane was developing Interschool Puzzle Club. And I think in concert with this growth and awareness of speed puzzling in Australia, her business was also taking off. And I think it became apparent to her that maybe she needed to step down a little bit earlier. So she came to me in October, which is about a month before nationals, and said, "So I'm thinking of stepping down a little bit earlier." And I was like, "How much earlier?" She's like, "A year earlier." So I remember thinking, "Oh wow!" So while I was not involved in a lot of the organization, I was the vice president at the time of 2024 nationals, and learning a lot and knowing that I'd be effectively taking the reins in only a few months from then. So it was definitely a moment where I was absorbing everything I could. I was looking at everything, all the touch points for the, the competitors, our spectators, try to understand our relationship with our major sponsor, of course, Ravensburger, and just really understanding a lot of the event planning. And of course, there was also a transition, not only when Diane transitioned from the president role, there was a transition of a few other key roles in the organization at the time,
Mm.
including our main events planner or the head of the events management team. And that was the opportunity where Melissa Townsend stepped in and really has thrived in that role. She's got an incredible professional skill set as well that she brings to that role. So yeah, it was it's interesting to reflect on how it all happened because it was very quick. A lot of the decisions were sort of happened faster than maybe they had intended.
I'm getting that arc from you in general.
Yes.
Like, I'm not getting, like, I'm getting a lot of like, well, we've decided to do things. Let's do the thing.
And I think that's true. There's a lot of momentum, and I'm happy just to kind of go with the flow. I'm not scared of a challenge. It was interesting that I submitted my PhD on the 28th of February, and then on the 15th of March of 2025, stepped into the president role. So I think I probably had been used to having a lot of things going on in an extracurricular sense. So I didn't have much of a break.
Do you recall whether you guys were expecting this sort of explosion of participants?
We did. And it was a track record of the state events basically selling out. So our state events, the capacity is around 200 solos and 200 pairs. And we've just been packing out these town halls. And we were really limited by the physical space. And then Diane and her team found this fantastic venue, which was basically a sports stadium, sort of double basketball court with a really cool tiered seating. And so that really allowed us to double the capacity. So I think we had around, 375 solos. It was a massive field. It really did stretch the limits of the volunteer
I was going to
field. I
say,
think
yeah.
timekeeping, logistics, we learned a lot from that. We did actually pull it back in 2025 to have preliminary rounds where we limited it to 300 participants. But that being said, we had 600 in 2025. So the trajectory is really, really up there. In 2026, we're probably going to be having a fairly similar number of people, but we are looking to having a multi-day nationals. I think that's probably the next step and where to go.
I looked over the puzzles that you guys have used over the last few years in terms of your nationals, and like beautiful teams puzzles, beautiful pairs puzzles, but you guys are really mean to your individuals. Like just very deeply complex, busy puzzles for all the years that you guys have been running this. So I strongly encourage people to go to worldjigsawpuzzle.org, look up the Australian individual or previous ones. A lot of people who are listening are be like, yeah, that seems like a fine puzzle. But I look at those and I'm like, ooh, boy, that's challenging. So you guys aren't afraid to throw a challenge at an individual, it seems.
You're probably talking mostly about Sweet Shop.
I'm talking about Sweet Shop, but like the one the prior year, the one the year before that, like those are not busy
Yes,
puzzles.
Disney. Yes.
Uh-huh.
We did take a little bit of a pivot this year. We were so lucky to get Summer Love. I think that was a real boon to have that ahead of pre-release. So we were incredibly grateful to Ravensburger. I think that sits quite beautifully at the intersection of a range of different components. You've got a sky, you've also got the sort of the busyness and repetition in the lily pond. That was a slight pivot from previous years. And it was quite intentional.
Yeah. So then in 2025, you ascend to the presidency of the Australian Jigsaw Puzzle Association. You said that Melissa was doing the event side of things. What are the things that you are doing aside from the actual event organizing? Because I feel like this is a thing that people don't have a lot of exposure to. Like, I'm going to take a different tangent here for just a second. You mentioned grant writing earlier, and as exciting as I know a lot of people are feeling about grant writing when I say that, grant writing comes up a surprising amount in Jigsaw Puzzle Association organization. Like, I think that it is not a thing that I would have been like, we're going to create an association and suddenly we're going to have to start applying for a bunch of grants, or that's an opportunity for us. So if you could, like, give us a little bit of background as to what else goes on at a especially national level that isn't just organizing the event.
Mm. So a lot, actually. And I suppose one of my philosophies coming into the president role was to really wrap my head around the differences between the event planning and event management, which is really the sort of public facing part of the organization. And at the same time, getting a handle on the governance and the processes that actually allow an organization to really thrive. And when you've got a lot of volunteers and the logistics of coordinating volunteers across, for us, the whole of Australia, I think it was really important to get a handle on things like, the way that we do things, and particularly a lot of the knowledge for organizations when they transition from a founder as the initial leader into the second kind of generation of leadership.
Mhm.
It's really about getting that knowledge, that kind of institutional knowledge that's mostly within the mind of the founder or that initial president, to be able to hand that knowledge over to the next group to come in so that we can start doing things in a sustainable and, I suppose, characteristic way. We had a real voice as a community organization when I took over, and it was really important to me that I continued that legacy. But knowing how we do things and getting those kind of processes, I suppose, sort of written down was one of the big tasks that I moved into. And we've actually spent a lot of time doing that. We have a big membership. We have over 1,400 members. So they have,
Mm.
sort of expectations of what we provide as an association. We're also not, certainly in AJPA, we're also not just about speed puzzling. We've made a very deliberate decision as a committee that we represent all jigsaw puzzlers out there. Our mission is really to bring the jigsaw puzzling community of Australia together. So we're quite focused on making sure that we have, events that are community based, that we support puzzle swaps, that we make everyone feel who comes to a jigsaw puzzle competition, whether they're there for speed or whether they're there just to have a go. And then, of course, you have to work very tirelessly to get the events up and running. And we have a task of running, 6 state competitions as well as a nationals. And if you take sort of out Christmas and Easter, major holidays of the year, we're pretty much running an event like most months of the year. And that's a lot of puzzles to get access to. It's a lot of venues to have relationships with, furniture suppliers. So there's a lot of organization that as a group, we've got really clear roles, hugely dedicated volunteers. So a lot of I suppose, the role in the administrative side is also trying to make sure all of those moving parts are all moving in unison and that we're executing our events on time, that jigsaw puzzles are arriving on time, that they're of a great quality, that they're really giving people the experience that they want. So it has certainly been a challenge. And being in Australia, where we're about 4 months shipping time from any from any puzzle that gets on a boat, we have to wait at least 4 months for it to ship.
Wow.
So there've been some pretty hairy moments where puzzles have either just arrived in the nick of time or it's become clear that they're not going to get off ship, and I'm having to pivot to alternative plans. So it's been a really busy year, I would say, first year in learning all of those things, becoming resourceful enough to actually get these competitions off the ground.
We come around into 2025 world, and there's this rumbling going on in the background, I notice, of some other competition. And then World struggles this last year, I think it is fair to say. But during World, there was this kind of counter programming going on subtly and then less subtly. over the course of the competition about something new coming out. And then it was not long after that, maybe even during that, I can't quite remember. I know that there was the website was up and running and people were finding the website. And so there's like this low murmur of something else going on. And then we find that there is something calling itself the Speed Puzzle World Series. And it turns out subsequently that we learn that Melissa Townsend is, I think, the first person we learn who's actually directly involved with that on a day-to-day basis, and then yourself. So I would love for you to sort of run back for me how this idea got started, what made a World Series want to exist in your guys' mind, because it's not like you didn't have other things to do. Like you guys have
Yeah.
actual jobs and your hobby is a whole other job. And you were like, well, I have a whole nother job's worth of time, so let's just toss it at something else. So tell me what sparks this idea.
It's definitely the awe that we have for the puzzling talent that is emerging and evolving. And so I think the passion for puzzling, as we've discussed, has just been on this enormously fast, like rapid trajectory of skills that are just blowing our minds. And I think that it became very apparent, particularly as we've gone to a lot of competitions and certainly from the organizational point of view and a participant. It started becoming very apparent that there are so many variables when it comes to jigsaw puzzling. It's really down to, what puzzle it is. Is it we were talking before about those kind of busy puzzles that we'd had in Australia. So we'd had this
Mhm.
this kind of, I suppose, disquiet around the idea that a final comes down to just one puzzle. And
Yeah.
is the puzzle going to fall your way? And so I was becoming very cognizant of that as an organizer, and particularly as I was thrown into needing to choose a lot of puzzles for many, many events in a really short period of time. It's something that I was thinking about a lot. And again, that visual and that appreciation that I've always had for puzzle images was just forefront of my mind. In parallel, Melissa Townsend is an absolute stellar puzzler herself. She's a previous national champion and part of the Aussie All Stars. And so, from her perspective, in all the training that she had done, she was really fascinated with this concept of the different styles of puzzles. And so, the two of us were really, I think, looking at speed puzzling and the fairness of competition and versa- versatile kind of nature of puzzlers. We were looking at it from different angles, but coming together and therefore having a lot of conversations around what would a great, fair, dynamic competition look like. And it became very apparent when Mel threw this idea out there that she's like, well, it needs to be a series of puzzles. It needs to be a variety of different puzzle styles, and not only different puzzles image styles, but also the other variables that we know challenge puzzlers, such as space management, and even the different format of rectangle versus circular, and different cuts and things like that. So it was really a lot of conversations that were going around about initially how can we introduce these concepts into our own AJPA competitions, but very quickly realizing that there probably wasn't the space to do that within the AJPA. It doesn't really align with our overarching mission, which is to try to get as many people into puzzling as possible. So we thought something, we thought radically, okay, well, why don't we just do a competition that had a series of events, but we could do it in Australia. And then we just thought, oh, no one will come to Australia. So it just kind of put the idea on the back burner for a little while.
And roughly, do you have a sense of when this conversation would have been going on?
Yeah, it was June of last year. So a few months before Worlds. But it wasn't a developed idea. It was definitely something we were thinking we could maybe make happen in 2027. probably at the earliest. That's kind of where our head was at around the inception of the idea.
And you said that you tabled it for some period of time. Again, you guys are not lacking for things to do. What caused you to bring it back up?
I think probably seeing the talent at Worlds and realizing that there is just this insatiable appetite for something like this really kind of spurred us to say, I think we should really make this happen sooner rather than the original plan of maybe in 2027.
And would that have been while 2025 Worlds was going on, or this been prior or after? It couldn't have been after that because things seem already in motion by the time Worlds gets here.
Yeah. So at Worlds, we had not chosen a date at all. Like that was,
But you'd gotten to a point where you were
we were
considering
like, we
it pretty
think this should
heavily.
happen. Yes. But again, I think we were thinking probably sort of late 2026. It was definitely a decision in motion and it was a very dynamic kind of fluid plan at that time. But I think that the plan to do it in May 2026 was, we really only decided on that just after Worlds because we had to do venue hunting. And yeah, it's only once you find a venue that you can actually lock in a date.
So you have determined that there is a format that you guys think should exist, and you've pushed forward the idea that the actual competition should exist, but not in
Mhm.
Australia where it would be convenient for you, but halfway around the world, practically literally, maybe actually literally halfway around the world from you guys, in of all places, Germany. And you're like, well, if we can't plan it near us, let's plan it in a whole other country. I don't know if you guys are native language speakers. I don't know if you guys have people on the ground who can find properties that like venues. It seems like you were like, it's not enough to start a whole new competition, but we should do it in the most logistically complex way we could possibly manage that.
It is, yeah, it is logistically complex, but I think we've always just been driven by the experience of the participants. So I think that's how our decision making has always been. It's been such a priority that we make it in a location that is easy for travel. We're very cognizant that doing something in Australia is probably not going to be the right solution. And also because we've had so much experience with organizing events in other states around Australia,
Hmm.
the distance wasn't so much of an
It's an
issue.
interesting point because you already have
Yeah.
distance in Australia.
And we were already doing it on a monthly basis in Australia, dealing with venues that are in a different physical location. So there is some naivety to that. It's certainly more complex than we did set out. But I don't think we didn't see that as a challenge because it was something that we'd already successfully navigated. And both Mel and I are people that if we put our minds to something, we'll make it happen. So I think that's really the thought process around that. It's interesting to be asked about that because I don't think I've ever really reflected on where there might have been hurdles or potential impediments. For us, it just seemed like it was something that would be in the best interest of the participants. So it's something that we should do.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that if you're going to start something new, you should know less than you should about it. Otherwise, you'll never do it. It's the enthusiasm that drives you forward that propels you through all the problems you're eventually going to find. So I
Mhm.
feel like you guys, in fact, did it the right way. You're like, this should exist. By golly, let's make this exist. We're going to start doing it. And hey, there's a bunch of hard things that have to come around. Well, I guess we solved those problems because we're committed now.
Yeah, and look, I think for us as well, we didn't know how much it would resonate with the community. When you start doing something like this, it could have been a really small event. We did want to make a reasonable number of tickets available, but we were we've been quite overwhelmed with how positive the reception has been. That's not something that we anticipated. We are delighted, and we dreamed that at the beginning. But we're really lucky with how the community has adopted it, really. And I think I can acknowledge that there was a space for this as well. The the timing of people coming off the back of the champs and particularly the really fast puzzlers wanting a new space, a new platform for them to really develop these amazing skills and display these skills. It's always been our intention to be complementary to the current existing landscape of events. I think you can see with the things like EJJ, like puzzlers just have an insatiable appetite. The more competitions exist, people will be happier. And I think there'll be many more competitions that exist, and there will probably be other events that will emerge that are leaning into this concept that we're doing with a series of jigsaw puzzles. There's obviously logistics and ceiling effect that when you have, if you have access to 2, 3, 4 puzzles, do you open it up to a preliminary, heat style elimination and get more puzzlers doing that every time you choose a different puzzle to use on the same group of participants? As an inherent reduction in the total number of participants that you can have. So it's one of these competitions that I think that will always be, complementary to what I believe are really important events to continue the large scale, very broad appeal kind of events that I think the World Championships has decided to be.
I'm part of their competition in the United States, the Portland Jigsaw Masters, and we think about that competition like it is sort of modeled after a concept in golf. But like in golf, there's lots of different ways of competing, right? There's not just a standard you come and you work through 18 holes. There's a lot of different formats that people like to engage in and a lot of different venues with a lot of different styles. And so to your point, there's a lot of room for new things. And I like the idea that you're saying that, there is the state, national, and international hierarchy of events that we have currently, but there's ways of really pushing ourselves in different directions at the same time and maybe having a different kind of fun and showing off different sets of skills. I think we've probably stalled long enough. I would love to dig a little bit more into the details of what the actual format of the competition is so that if folks aren't
Sure.
really aware, like you've talked about it being sort of a series of puzzles, but can you give me sort of the next level down view of what the actual format of the competition is?
Yeah, so the format's really the brainchild of Mel, and the idea of distilling down on the first day kind of 3 different image styles, and then on day 2 some kind of challenges that will really play around with the idea of space management and also visual management. So day 1 we have 3 styles. So color gradient is challenge 1. Challenge 2 is pattern repetition. And challenge 3 is detailed or busy detail. I won't go into too much about those because we do really want the participants to interpret what those really mean to them.
Hmm.
But I think that there's already been a lot of general talk around those kind of styles, which have probably emerged from previous competitions, our learnings about previous styles of puzzlers that people lean into. And day 2, the challenges are probably the one that is the most interesting from a social media engagement point of view, and just seeing all the training that we've seen is a mystery challenge. So mystery where it's an unboxed image, so they will not get the box until after the event. It's also a mystery brand. So I'm really loving the idea that there will be so many folks out there who've been training and really having a new and exciting way to deal with jigsaw puzzles in a speed sense that they probably haven't engaged with in the past. So I think that's probably where people feel the most challenged. That's certainly what I've seen from across the social channels. But again, the thing that I've really enjoyed seeing is that people feel challenged in such a positive way. So again,
Mhm.
it's something that hasn't existed in an international competition before. And it's just a really creative and strategic way to introduce an entirely new event. Challenges 5 and challenges 6 are both physical format challenges. So we've got the circle puzzle, which of course has been introduced in some of the international competitions. So challenge number 6 is the panorama format. So this is the puzzle that's going to be taking up so much of the space of the table left to right. There's almost no room when you've got this panorama, particularly if you're someone who loves the borders. It's going to be such an interesting display of spatial management. So I think that's going to be and again, the piece count being slightly higher at 636. It's another endurance challenge. It's the last challenge of the event. I think it'll be a really interesting challenge to finish the competition on.
Yeah, and I think there's something that maybe we haven't said explicitly that's worth saying, which is that the format of this competition is that it's an individuals only competition, right? There's no pairs, there's no teams. And you come in on day 1, which I think is a Friday the 1st of May, if I'm remembering correctly. And you as an individual are competing in all 6 of these competitions.
Yes.
There's no elimination. There are breaks, but you're doing 3 competitions each day for 2 days. You're sitting at the same table, if I recall correctly. And so you better become good friends with your neighbor.
Yes.
So you can think of it as a standard competition with special puzzle types, but it sort of isn't in a real meaningful way, exactly as you said, which is that by the end of day 2, you will have done all 6 of these puzzles, and you will have ended on the bigger puzzle, a spatial management puzzle. It's not a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's sort of like a bunch of sprints tied into a marathon length in a way. So it really does push not just your skills at gradients or repetitions or solving mystery problems or circular problems, but your ability to focus over a substantial period of time, your ability to maintain yourself over a substantial period of time to get this all out. So it would be underselling it if I were to say that it is just 6 things you have to do. It's the combination of those 6 things that adds its own extra challenge to the thing.
Yeah, and it was really those extra dimensions that we felt, means that it does stand alone as a really different and unique and complementary style of event. And we recognize it's not for everyone. It really is something that would be quite intimidating for a lot of folks. So it's certainly not the kind of puzzle competition that somebody like myself would immediately put my hand up for. I'd have to think twice about about doing it, but it's for the Mel Townsends of the world. So I think that, again, that's why it's really complementary. I really, I will very happily go back to, a competition that's a world champion format or the one that's our state and nationals. But yeah, this is a different platform, a different space for people who really want to challenge themselves. And I think it's really going to be a lovely and exciting thing to watch, because the talent that's out there is just, for me, so inspirational. And this event is probably going to be very aspirational for a lot of people to see some of our favorite puzzlers, just really push themselves and really push the boundaries of what is possible in speed puzzling is something that I'm really excited about. And I think a lot of other people are too.
Yeah, I'm 100% one of them. As a person who loves the elite competition and the elite capabilities that certain rarefied group of people can do, so much that I have a podcast just so that I have an excuse to talk to those people. Like, I am 100% on board of trying to push as far as you can go and drive to new kinds of excellence. I just tangents are sort of my business, so I'll tangent again here real quick. At the US Nationals, there was a speed run competition. And so speed run is where they release a puzzle at the beginning of the year, and you have until the next nationals to sort of get your best time, practice on it as much as you want, submit as many times as you want. And they had a sort of quasi exhibition of anybody who wanted at nationals, because all the times had already been submitted in the official competition. But if you wanted to bring a puzzle, you could compete, as it were, live with other people at the individuals, pairs, and teams level. And that was so inspiring to watch. Like, it was, if you want to watch an individual complete a 500-piece puzzle in, under 18 minutes, like, that is pushing the bounds of what humans can do. And it's these kinds of things which help us really understand what excellence is. So as a person who's been involved in so many conversations about should worlds have ended on multiple puzzles because multiple puzzles would push people in different directions, and rather than, to your earlier point, just landing on, like, you got to have the luck of the draw that it's a busy puzzle and you love busy puzzles, or it's a landscape and you love landscapes. If there are more puzzles, then you're going to have the broader ability to see who's the best in the world and not who just got a good draw. And you guys are
Mm,
taking that to the next degree and being like, okay, here's the gauntlet you have to run if you want to be the champion of the Speed Puzzling
mm.
World Series. The last thing, I think, important thing that we may have not touched on is, how do you at the end determine who is the winner?
So it's cumulative scoring. So cumulative time. So it'll ultimately be the winner with the lowest time across all 6 puzzles.
How do you factor in people who don't complete a puzzle?
So it's something we spent quite a lot of time really discussing in terms of fairness. We've got all that detail explained all the rules outlined on speedpuzzle.com. And essentially, we will assign for every piece that is not completed above the time count, there'll be a 5-second penalty assigned to each of those pieces. And again, we have the ability to make sure that that's not confounded by anyone who doesn't start a puzzle or complete a puzzle. They will accumulate the full time plus all the remaining pieces. So it was really important that we created a system that meant that everybody, regardless of whether they finish the puzzle or not, can actually um, be part of this kind of ongoing cumulative leaderboard. And we're very confident that that is going to be basically the solution that we found.
Yeah, I mean, your competition is aimed at sort of more elite folks, but it is open to anybody who wants to show up, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
And one of the benefits of this competition is that it is set up such that if you start competing, you're not like me. If you're not Lou, who's the, top of the middle of the pack, but if you're like Rob, who's the bottom of the pack, if you were there, you're not getting eliminated in the first round. You're still
Absolutely.
you're actively engaged in puzzling the entire time.
Absolutely.
So it is important then that you might be a Lou in this competition and find that some puzzle doesn't quite work for you and that you weren't able to complete it, but maybe you do excellent at some of the other puzzles, and you want to
Mm,
make sure that those things all come together in a equitable way, that you can still have a finishing position that reflects your capabilities as being tested through this gauntlet that you have created.
absolutely. And we don't, obviously, because we've never run an event before, we don't have, an algorithm with like full of data on all the puzzlers. There's obviously many puzzlers who have, publicly available results, but there are also, some people who probably purchasing a ticket and coming along, and this could be one of their first competitions, and they're a dark horse and they've just been training at home and they have an amazing talent, and this is their first competition. And
What a
so
one to
it's,
choose.
I know. If somebody is choosing this as a first one, then good on them. Like I love that people are backing themselves. Again, I think because we're very conscious that this is a sort of more of an endurance and versatility, and it will be intimidating for a lot of people. I've really enjoyed seeing how many people are putting themselves up for the challenge, and I think there'll be a lot of people who will surprise themselves. A lot of the social media that I've seen has been particularly around the unboxed and the panorama
Mhm.
challenge, and people sort of suggesting they might not make it in the time limit. So that's an hour and 15 for the unboxed puzzle and an hour and a half for the panorama. And it's such a delight when you see these posts where they're like, "Oh, I just made the time cap. I would have just made it." Like that sense of achievement even before they've stepped up to the competition is something that I find incredibly rewarding, and is really nice to have seen that it's already had an impact in the preparatory phase.
You've said that you've gotten some really great reception around this whole thing. I'm curious as to how that might have reflected in terms of ticket sales. You had something like 300 spots open for this competition.
Yeah, so 340 spots open. And I think at last count, we've got about 4% of tickets left. So, yeah, just got over about 20 tickets remaining. We did see a large number of ticket sales in the first sort of couple of days. So there are obviously a lot of people who'd been interested and sort of had made the decision when we put tickets on sale.
Yeah.
And then it's just been a sort of slow sort of uptake of people. I think as people have heard about it, or maybe they've been practicing at home, training and thinking they can take on the challenge.
So still tickets available.
Mhm.
If they're so convinced by this episode that they should run out and do it, that's still an option for
Absolutely.
them.
Yes.
There's a couple of quick things that I noted that I just thought was amusing that I would pass along to you. You probably know at least some of these, but according to the competitors list that you have listed on your website, and I don't know if that's up to date or if that's been out a while, but you're covering off on 38 different countries. You've got more than 50 of last year's top 200 finalists in the world.
Mhm.
On in your, I think it's 55 who are on the list. Interestingly, currently Worlds doesn't have that many returning people signed up for. It's a ways off, so it's not quite a fair comparison, but I did find that amusing. And you have 35 of the top 50 competitors in last year's Worlds coming here. So, you're not wrong when you say that it sort of, especially for elite level puzzlers, it resonate. It was a thing that they're like, yeah, let's push ourselves harder in different directions simultaneously.
Yeah, and I think really that's just a reflection of the fact that we really listened to the community. Mel is one of these top puzzlers,
Yeah.
and she really understands the technical side of puzzling. I've also seen that from our fast puzzlers in Australia. The elephant in the room when you're organizing one of these speed puzzle competitions is how do you accommodate for everybody's expectations? And that
Mm,
we do have the full spectrum of participants. How do you celebrate the fastest people on the planet at a relatively, a young kind of skill set that is clearly evolving and is evolving so quickly? If you only look about 5 years ago, the times that people were posting to win a competition, the same individual people are now so much faster. And at the same time, we've had so many other people come out of the woodwork, realizing they're fast or as fast, if not faster. And I think there's such an appetite for pushing the boundaries in training. Another thing that the community is so good about is sharing tips and tricks on how to get better. Like there's a deep fascination with where speed puzzling can go. And so you have to balance that drive with the people who just want to have a go. And even if you aren't one of the super fast puzzlers, there's still, I believe, a huge place for speed puzzling on a personal level. And I think for me, that's why the challenge when you're organizing a competition is thinking about those different groups, those different agendas that people will bring, and how do you create a platform or an event that caters to all. And that's probably where maybe some of the conversation around world championships last year that's probably the space people got into, the desires of people wanting to be able to come and have a go, and versus the really elite puzzlers who want to sort of take it in a new direction. So yeah, it's just a new offering, and I think that's probably why we were so passionate enough to drive this forward.
Were you guys talking to other competitive, elite level competitive jigsaw puzzlers as you were bringing this about? Because while nobody ever came out and told me anything super secret, I did get the sense that maybe some of the more elite puzzlers had some idea of what was going on here beyond what I had, which was practically nothing. Or was this mostly just, born out of Mel's brainchild and seemed like a great idea and away we went?
So it really is Mel's brainchild, but at the same time, asking other people, do you think this type of thing would work? Is
Hmm.
really, an opportunity to ask other people, do you think would this be something you would like? Yeah, so we took that opportunity just to kind of soundboard with some really great people. And yeah, the overwhelming response was, yeah, this would be great. This doesn't exist. This sounds like something that should exist. So it's hard to not take that feedback and not be propelled through the momentum of it. So
If you don't mind, I'd love to get in the weeds of a little bit of this.
mhm,
Just there's some things I would love to further explore now that we have a good sense of sort of the top line of what this is all about. It looks like your first three puzzles are Ravensburgers. Your last
mhm,
two puzzles are Gibsons, and then your mystery puzzle is a mystery, which is
mhm.
I love. First of all, it's interesting to see Ravensburger involved. Not surprising, but especially because you guys probably have a relationship with Ravensburger going back to the Australian side of things. I might expect a greater brand diversity in these puzzles. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
So to be clear, these are not sponsors.
Mhm.
We've done custom sort of puzzle manufacturing, so it's really a direct supplier relationship that we've established for these brands, and and so it's not really any kind of crossover of sponsorship, and it really comes down to the practicalities of being able to get puzzles made in such a short time frame from between deciding that we really were going to do this in September of last year to
Yeah.
putting an event on in May. It was really filling out who would be able to be in sort of supply partnership with
Right.
us, and we had to get things done pretty quickly. And it was, yeah, we were stoked when those brands said that they had the capabilities to manufacture puzzles at our request in that time frame. So we knew that so many people were familiar with Ravensburger as part of the speed puzzling world. So it makes a lot of sense to choose, particularly where we wanted the image to be the feature or the variable of the competition,
Mm.
rather than the brand itself. So having a uniform brand on the first day where we know that people are mostly focusing on the style of the image, it kind of, again, we were just thinking about reducing those variables and ultimately creating this equitable, high integrity competition.
And all of these images are unreleased. Are these images that you sourced yourselves and then provided? That's what it sounds like,
Yes,
as opposed
yes.
to like I know Ravensburger has access to back catalogs of imagery and that sort of thing. So these are all things that you guys sourced or created.
Yeah. So Mel and I are in full, complete control of the images.
You don't have to answer this because I don't know where you're going to draw the line on this. But are the images that you guys found or created?
Yeah. In the spirit of competition, I won't answer that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Spirit of fairness. But I appreciate the question.
All right.
And it's a question that we can certainly, we'll be able to, will become very apparent on the day.
All right. Fair enough. Um, with Lou the Puzzler, which of these rounds is the one that speaks to you most?
Color gradient for sure.
Color
Yeah.
gradient. All right,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I got to ask on the other side, what's the one you would be most intimidated by?
I think for me, detailed. Yeah. I'm someone who just, I can't hold an image in my head where it's kind of random detail. So,
Mm, you talked about spectators. I know that spectating. I think you even said this really early in the podcast. Spectating is something that is on your minds, on Mel's mind. It's definitely on my mind as a person who is sort of the back of the back puzzler, but is just passionate about watching competitive
mhm.
jigsaw puzzling. The spectator experience is near and dear to my heart. So I know that you guys were thoughtful about this. I wonder if you can tell me more about it.
Yeah, so something that we've done with AJPA competitions is really lean towards venues that have either a balcony zone or a sort of a tiered stadium style
Hmm.
seating. And again, that's something that the venue that we've chosen, which is the Turnhalle in Munich, has a really great elevated balcony. So really leaning into that in-person spectator experience is something that it was sort of a non-negotiable for us. It obviously limits the number of venues. You can get a lot of great large floor spaces in convention centers where there is sort of flat viewing areas, but we really wanted to make the spectator experience something that they can feel like they're immersed in, looking down on the puzzlers and seeing these, ultimately it's a really kind of enticing spectator sport, and it's something that I think really surprises spectators when they come to a lot of events, how just absorbing it is to watch people do these puzzles. And you can think back to those experiences at Worlds where there's this hush in the room as those last sort of 5-10 minutes, and who's going to win, and just watching these images come together so quickly, and the way a puzzle speeds up at the end, it really is something that blows my mind. And I think that so many spectators just really enjoy that component. So that's why we wanted to have an in-person experience with an elevated spectator area. But again, also thinking about from a live stream perspective.
I'm going to dig a little more into the live stream, but I want to touch on one last thing on well, actually a couple of things on the physical presence side of things. So one of the challenges that one can have, even if there is the appropriate sort of arced seating or the view down into the area, is that often some of the most elite folks are sort of by judging necessity sort of out of the way because they need to be closest to like the judging area.
Mhm.
In your arrangement of this venue, are folks who are in the sort of balcony area going to be able to look down at your Victor Kaspaceks of the world as they're puzzling?
Yeah, they will be up front. So we've reversed the room.
Oh, neat.
Yes.
I've talked to most of the elite, not most of them, a good number of the elite jigsaw puzzlers in the world, and I've asked them about this because, again, like as a person who really loves to watch the work that they can do, loves to see the pinnacle of human performance in this particular area, I want to see that stuff. And I know that
Yes.
there's issues
Yes.
with potentially pressure or distraction or any number of other things by being facing the audience.
Mhm.
But more than half of the ones that I've talked to are fine with that. Like they're like, "Yep, that's
Yeah.
part of the competition."
Yeah. So we're totally thinking along the same lines as you, like that, they're in the zone. It's Mel's kind of brainchild, and I think, she's really excited about it.
So for spectators, entry is free, right? Like if you're just in the
Mhm.
general area, you can swing by, see some
Yeah,
world-class competitive jigsaw puzzling, and it's not going to cost you anything.
absolutely.
So tell me about the live stream. Are you guys announcing the hosts? Because I see that you have teased the host, but I couldn't find any resilient artifact that suggests you've actually said who the hosts are. Is that something you're revealing at this point, or is this another we're going to sort of keep the blanket over top of it until the last moment?
Yes, I think you're right. Like through our social media, we haven't officially said, but if you haven't already guessed, it's Jim and Fuji.
You probably know them from EJJ. That's where they both do a lot of announcing work.
Mhm.
Both spectacular individuals. I'm a huge fan of both of them. So that is already exciting from a live stream watcher's perspective.
Yeah, I think they're so engaging to listen to. I'm delighted that they're involved. But I think they'll be doing some content in the next couple of days, or
Mm.
the next couple of weeks in the lead up, just to drum up the excitement.
It looks like you guys are intending your YouTube channel to be more than just the live stream. It sounded like in a recent video you released, there's sort of teasing about tips and other things. Is there a bigger picture as far as that is concerned?
Yeah, the live stream will definitely be a channel for which we're, sort of communicating with the greater puzzling sort of audience. At the moment, it's really mostly a way for us to communicate with participants in the lead up
Mhm.
to the
Mhm.
competition. So you'll notice we've just done a little bit of a Q&A about this event specific. Again, that's something that's probably will continue to evolve, and most of our headspace at the moment is really focused on this competition, executing this. But ideally, based on the positive reception that we've had, I think there's definitely an opportunity to grow that YouTube a little bit bigger. And again, it'll just be dictated by what we like, the feedback that we get after this event. And I suppose as a team, Mel and I are dedicated to being very responsive to what our participants and spectators want. So that's probably where that a lot of that will occur on YouTube and also on Instagram.
The last in the weeds thing I want to get to is something I wholly did not expect to find. It caught me entirely off guard, which you guys have collector's cards for
Yes.
competitive jigsaw. Tell me all about that. I need to know how it came to be, what it is. Just give me all the details you can about it.
So again, it's just recognizing that these guys are superstars. And Mel and I feel really passionate about that. Fast puzzlers should be recognized as athletes. Like, whether they're officially termed athletes, in our minds, the feats that they're achieving are just so incredible. And they just deserve to be up in lights and treated like the amazing superstars that we think they are. And so the idea of the collector cards really came from that idea, the conversations that we had of these, of how can we elevate the experience for the participants? How can we make them feel like they're really these great competitors that really deserve to be, I don't know, admired, and they inspire so many people. So obviously, sort of collector cards. The way that Mel describes it is, Pokemon or baseball cards, and think of those and put you as a puzzler on it. And again, it's just a way that I think will bring the community together as well. We're really hoping that at this event that it encourages a lot of people to, interact with each other and searching for different, cards at the event amongst people who you may not know. Will just encourage a lot of friendship and discussion as well. So yeah, it touches a lot of aspects that we really want to promote through this event, promoting excellence, but also promoting community. So that's kind of how it really came about.
I feel like I desperately need these cards. So I know that they're being released on site, and I know that you guys are mostly releasing stock on site. And if there's overflow from some stock, there may be opportunities to purchase them. Talk to me a little bit about both the puzzles that you guys are releasing and the cards that you guys are releasing in terms of being able to access them outside of the venue itself.
Yeah. So look, I suppose from a decision making point of view, we've kind of been a bit conservative in
Mhm.
the, sort of the stock. Again, the collector cards was another sort of idea that was a bit of a crazy idea and maybe a bit of a risk. And we really weren't sure if anyone would take up the opportunity. That there's the vast majority of participants have said yes, and they've been really excited about it. So we anticipate that probably the amount of cards that we have will be like probably all sold on site. Um, and we are intending them to be a limited edition. But if I think the best way to get your hands on some is if someone is going to the event, maybe they can purchase some for you. But again, these are really, you know, because they're ideas that are really brand new, and we weren't expecting how they were going. We will continue to think about them for future iterations of the event, which I imagine will happen based on the positive feedback that we've had so far.
Some bigger picture questions for you. So, as of when you and I are talking, there are 19 days left for this event.
Hmm.
What things are top of your mind right now in terms of heading towards getting that event actually birthed out into the world?
Yeah, so we've got a really comprehensive to do list. So Mel and I had about 3 hours of final planning last week. We're on top of every aspect of organization. We've got everything, everything's written down in terms of logistics of deliveries, working with the venue, working to make sure that our participants have all the information that they need ahead of time. We've been really pleasantly surprised that we've really tried to make our communication comprehensive and upfront. So trying to answer as much information as possible on our website. That's been really great because it sort of reduced the need for extra communication. So we feel confident that our participants feel confident in what's expected of them. We haven't had any rule changes. We've tried to be very consistent on those types of things. Obviously, there's a little bit of anxiety in the world in terms of travel at the moment. It's really difficult time for a lot of people. And it's a sort of a first world problem to be thinking about event management and a puzzle competition. But of course, from a logistics point of view, it throws a little bit of extra uncertainty
Sure. Yeah.
In there. But yeah, just as long as, people can travel to where they want to go and people can be as safe as they can. The 2-3 weeks leading up to the event is, of course, a really busy time for us, but we're really confident that things are on track and feeling, really good about things. So we couldn't wish to be in a better position.
What does success of this project look like to you?
There's so many things. I think the number one thing will be people walking away from this competition having participated and feeling like it was a fair event, feeling like it was the first time that they got to really say, I did my best. And the way that it fell across the 6 puzzles was a fair representation of where speed puzzling is today. I think that's the overarching definition of success for me.
Some elite puzzlers that I talk to, when things fall their way, they don't. Nobody's come out and said this, but I get the sense that they're always like, "Well, people feel like I won because this thing fell my way," and just to be able to say, "We tried this every different way, and I still did a great job here," feels like it could be extremely satisfying for the participant.
Absolutely. And I do think it is heartbreaking when somebody wins, the rules of a competition, particularly if you've got one puzzle in a final, and somebody goes and they win that fair and square. And it is heartbreaking for me to think that they might walk away with some kind of, concession or excuse or conversation that might sort of take away from their hard-earned victory. And so I really hope that people, walk away with a sense of satisfaction and that, whoever is the champion has really proved themselves. And it's even a greater achievement to have demonstrated consistency and versatility. And then it's just also exciting, the unknowing, the fact that we'll probably see a shuffling of the rankings. I doubt that the rankings on any one individual challenge will be consistent across all 6 challenges. And
It would
I
be
think that it'll
really
be,
interesting if they're not. Yeah.
yeah. So all of those elements I think are so experimental and but experimental in a way that they're informed by, a good kind of hypothesis that this will be a really fair and interesting event.
Before we head off into the speed round, remind us when this is, where it is, and how people can find more about it.
Yes, so Speed Puzzle World Series, the inaugural event, is on the 1st and 2nd of May in Munich. Tickets, a limited number of tickets are still available, so anyone is thinking we've got about 20 spots left. Spectators can come along for free, as we've already mentioned. So if you're in Munich, please do come along. Online, it'll be our YouTube. We'll be live streaming on the YouTube, which is at Speed Puzzle World Series. And also you can follow us along on Instagram, which is at Speed Puzzle.
All right. Ready for the speed round?
I am ready.
Shifting to a whole different thing. Moving from long form answers to as short as possible. Speed round is where I give you a series of questions, and you just give me your quick hit answers to each one of these. Here we go. Gradients, patterns, or fur?
Gradient.
Illustration or photo?
Photo.
Busy or landscape?
Landscape for sure.
Round or square?
Square.
Wood or cardboard?
Cardboard.
Individuals, pairs, or teams?
Pairs. I'm always a better puzzler in a pair.
Ribbon cut or random cut?
I really like ribbon cut.
300, 500, or 1,000?
1,000 because of the nostalgia factor, always reminding me of my childhood. Yeah.
Do you have a current favorite brand?
Ravensburger is definitely highest on rotation in my home. But I'm also really loving Magnolia and Schmidt.
And do you have a current favorite puzzle?
My all-time favorite puzzle would definitely be a Charles Wasocki. It's a beautiful winter scene that's got gorgeous horses, and it's just so whimsical and has such a cherished place in my heart. And I think the pieces are completely falling apart. But in the current sort of catalogue, I would have to say that Summer Love from the Australian Nationals is my favourite. Obviously didn't get to participate in it. I was hosting on stage, but to be able to bring the work that I did with Ravensburger, to bring that to the competition in Australia, it's just a beautiful puzzle, and it means a lot to me.
Where can people find out more about you? You specifically. We've told them where to find out more about the event.
So my Instagram is at Louise Jackett. It's a terrible Instagram profile, however. And so I think that's testament to the fact that I've been a bit busy with other things. But I promise I'll make it a little bit better.
I don't believe it at all. I believe that if you find 10 minutes of extra time, you're going to start some other thing rather than there'll be some new Lou Jackett experience in the world to have. I think that's not working on your Instagram doesn't feel like the place you'll spend your time. With that, Lou Jackett, I appreciate deeply you spending some time with me. I wish you and Mel all the luck in the world with the Speed Puzzle World Series, and I look forward to seeing how that all goes and watching the live streams.
Thanks, Rob. It was wonderful to chat with you.
Thanks for listening to Peace Talks. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at peace_talks, and you can send email to peacetalkscast@gmail.com.